Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I am coloring velvet from Odin Sphere using Copic markers on this Copic Bleedproof Marker Pad. As you can see, the paper is really thin, but it has a special coating that prevents ink from bleeding through it. Although, as you can see, you can actually see the color on the backside of the paper, and it has a special coating. So you're not supposed to draw on both sides of the paper, you're just supposed to draw on the special coated side. So let's get right into it. I'm starting off with coloring Velvet's cheeks in this video, and I'm using R00 and R30 when I'm coloring her cheeks. But I'm also using some of the yellow reds and other red shades. And I'm listing them here in the video so that you can also learn or take notes from watching the video and perhaps try out these colors for yourself. The next thing I'm coloring is her eyes, and for the base I was mixing yellow colors and a very bright green color. And I did this to achieve a little bit of a shining effect, because the stars around her will be giving off light, but also because if you add a color that is opposite or goes very well with the main color you're gonna use, it will pop out more. In my opinion, it looks more vibrant if you do it this way. So that's just a simple tip. Yay, welcome to my favorite part of coloring, golden stuff. I am using a range of yellow colors that I will list, and I always start with the brightest colors when I'm coloring, and that is because it's easier for me to see where the shadows will end up if I do it this way. But I know some people like to do it the other way around and starting with the darkest colors. But the brightest one I am using is the Y11. And then I go to Y13, Y15, Y19 and Y26. This darkest color is looking a little like mustard. In my opinion, it really adds that extra shining effect, because if something is going to shine, you need to add very dark colors as well to achieve that effect. When I'm using this paper, I never draw directly onto the paper. I always have a sketch somewhere else and then I trace it onto this paper, because it's so thin that if you have to erase a lot, it will actually damage the surface pretty bad. So originally I drew this in my Moleskine sketchbook, and it was originally in 2016. But at the time I didn't have a light box, so tracing it would be a pain. So that's why it's actually taken so much time for me to finish this. So now I'm trying to figure out where the shades would end up on her hand. And I first added some yellow colors for the highlights, and then I'm just using the basic skin colors that I always use to add some shade. So this paper is really good for blending colors, because of its special coating, and that makes it less absorbent of the ink, so you don't need to use as much as you would if you were using watercolor paper, for instance. But because of this, it's also harder to add many layers, which I usually do, because it kind of just sits on top of the paper, and if you're not careful and wait for it to dry, you are actually going to remove the layers underneath with the marker nib. So that is a challenge, and I usually make the mistake of not waiting enough for the basic layers to dry. When I'm coloring multiple layers, it usually looks a little blotchy, and that is not desirable, and I highly recommend that you try to wait for your basic layers to dry before adding more. So another tip when coloring is to add shades from another color family than your main colors. So for the hair I used a yellow-green color for the shades, and When you're coloring skin, for instance, you can add a violet color or a gray color, and the shadows will look a little more deep and give off a nice effect, especially when you're using a paper like this one, because it won't absorb so much color, so you need a darker color and often in another color family to really make these shadows stand out. And as I said before, it's a challenge when adding many colors. So when I was doing the hair, I didn't color the entire hair with the highlighted color first. I instead try to figure out where will the highlight be, and I try to isolate it to that area, because if I will color all of the hair and then add the next color and so on, that's when I get this problem of having the colors sitting on top of each other, and it will not look good. So a tip is to try to limit the space where you're adding the highlight and try to fill in the color from there. Don't add too many layers. When coloring the hood and the red parts of her clothes, I was using yellow colors to mark out where the highlights would be, and then I added some red tones and finally a red-violet tone, again to achieve a darker shade. This paper really makes the colors look vibrant, but due to that they also end up pretty bright. I think the best tip I can give you is to really try and mix in other color families when you are coloring. Another thing that is very good about this marker pad is that it's relatively cheap. It sells for around $8 on Amazon, and it comes with 50 sheets. So it's a good investment if you are new to Copic markers and you really want to achieve a vibrant result with your artwork. Since it's very thin, it's also very easy to trace onto this paper. I highly recommend that you have your main sketch on another paper and then just trace it over to this one before you start coloring. Also think about what ink you are using if you are making line art. Not all ink works with the Copic markers, and that is because they are alcohol based. I have tried different Multiliners and I prefer Copic Multiliner because that is a guarantee that they won't bleed when you add the Copic ink over them. But I can also recommend using Sakura Micron fine liner. I have never experienced that they bleed. However, I do recommend that whatever liner you are using, you should wait around 1 hour or more before you start coloring, because there is a risk that even the ink from the line art will sit on top of this paper because of its special coating. So when you're going over it with your Copic markers, there is a risk of them bleeding or spreading out. So be sure to be patient before you start coloring. So ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of this video. I'm very happy you watched this far, and I hope I could provide you with some good tips on using Copic markers on this Copic Marker Pad. If you like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribe, as I will have more videos coming up for you.